Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Today's story is a long one, and it is based on a story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. It is our prayer that others will see the image of Jesus in us. Nestled at the foot of a lofty mountain range in the northeastern part of the United States lay a beautiful, fertile valley. The people of the valley either lived in log farmhouses at the edge of the massive black forest or in the villages sprinkled along the clear stream that tumbled down from the mountains. To the west, in full view of the entire valley, a giant face was etched in the side of an enormous rock. It was as if a Titan had sculpted his own likeness on the precipice. There was the broad arch of the forehead and a hundred feet in height, the nose with a long bridge, and a vast lips which, if they could have, would have thundered from the one end of the valley to the other. Many believe that the serenity and fertility of the valley was in large part due to the great stone face that continually beamed across the land. In one of the log huts, a widow lived alone with her son Ernest. Daily the two gazed up at the great stone face. "Mother," Ernest said one day, "if the face could speak, I am certain it would have a kindly voice." "If an old prophecy should come to pass," the mother replied, "we may yet hear the face speak." The mother then told her son of a legend passed down from the Indians, murmured by the mountain streams and whispered by the wind, that one day a child born in the valley would grow to be a great and wise man bearing the exact likeness of the great stone face. She told how many had grown weary of waiting and no longer believed the legend. Others, however, held fast to it like a great promise. Ernest never forgot the story his mother told him. Seldom did a day pass when he did not look up at the face and think about the person who would come to the valley. Often at the end of a workday he would gaze at the face for hours. It gave him a sense of comfort and strength, for he saw honesty, love, and justice in the face, virtues he longed to experience. One day Ernest heard a rumor that a man who was born in the valley and who had made a great fortune was returning to spend his last years in the place of his birth. It was said that the man bore a striking resemblance to the great stone face. His name was Gathergold. Now, I am not certain that that was his real name. Perhaps it was given to him because of his talent for amassing great wealth as a merchant and shipbuilder. What is certain is that his fame had spread over the entire world. Preparations for the arrival of Gathergold began with a flourish. A famous architect came to help build a mansion made of white marble on the land where Gathergold's parents once farmed. Everything was custom designed. The finest craftsmen were hired, something unheard of in that tiny valley. Finally, Gathergold himself arrived in a carriage drawn by 4 beautiful horses. A huge crowd gathered for the occasion. As the carriage came into view, a great murmur went up. "Look, here he comes. He is the exact image of the great stone face. The prophecy has come true." As the crowd cheered, Ernest looked on in disbelief. Gathergold looked nothing like the figure he watched each evening. His skin was yellow, as if his Midas touch had colored him. He had a low forehead, small, sharp eyes, and thin lips. Ernest turned away sadly. As he walked home, he looked up at the gentle countenance that beamed across the valley, and for a moment he thought he heard the face say, "He will come. He will come." Years passed, and Ernest became a young man. Though he was hard-working and friendly, few knew him, for he was a quiet person. Although he had no formal education, he read many books. If you asked him, however, he would have told you that his favorite teacher was the Great Stone Face. By this time, Gathergold was dead. All the inhabitants in the valley had long ago conceded that there was little resemblance between him and the Great Stone Face. It was at this time that the hopes of the people of the valley were raised again. Another native son, known as Old Blood and Thunder, was returning to the valley to make his home. Those who knew the general were ready to testify that he had an uncanny resemblance to the Great Stone Face. Plans were made for a giant parade to welcome the military hero. Ernest and most of the people of the valley took the day off to watch the parade and cheer their famous son. Reverend Battleblast began the festivities with a prayer. Our Father, we give you humble thanks for the great blessings you have so graciously bestowed on this valley. We ask a special blessing on this great man of peace in whose honor we are gathered. As the general stepped forward, Ernest was blocked by the swirling crowd. Not being the least bit pushy, he waited until the crowd parted before he moved forward to view the great man. Ernest was amazed. Old Blood and Thunder looked nothing like the Great Stone Face, despite the voices in the crowd that declared, "He is the image of the face. The prophecy has been fulfilled." As the general spoke, Ernest was even more convinced that the hopes of the people were ill-placed. This is no man of peace like the Great Stone Face, Ernest thought. Ernest failed to identify the gentle wisdom and tender sympathy that he had come to associate with his stone teacher in Old Blood and Thunder. This is not the man of prophecy, Ernest sighed as he walked toward his home. The years sped swiftly and tranquilly by. Ernest was now a man in his middle years. He had gained a reputation among the people of the valley as a simple-hearted man of great wisdom. Seldom did a day pass when neighbors did not come to him for advice. People began to recognize in him something more than an ordinary man. By this time, people had become disillusioned with Old Blood and Thunder, and now awaited another who would fulfill the prophecy. Soon their hopes were placed on a noted politician who had been born in the valley, a man known as Old Stony Phiz. I need not tell you much about him except to say that it was clear in the beginning to Ernest that this was not the one who had the moral character of the Great Stone Face. The years moved on, and Ernest grew old. His hair was as white as snow, and wrinkles crossed his forehead and furrowed his cheeks. Time had also engraved deep wisdom in him. Many came from beyond the valley to talk or listen to him. People said, "His knowledge does not come from books. He has talked with angels." To each of his visitors, Ernest shared his hope that during his lifetime the Great Stone Face would appear. One day a great poet came to visit. He was a celebrated man who had heard of the wisdom of this gentle man of the valley. The poet was one whose words sparkled with the divine, whose words were acclaimed throughout the land. Ernest had read his poems. They had stirred his soul. The day the poet arrived, Ernest was reading one of the writer's books. "Good evening. Can you give a traveler a night's lodging?" asked the poet. "Gladly," answered Ernest, who then added, "I don't think I have ever seen the Great Stone Face look so hospitably on a stranger." The two men were quickly engaged in conversation and were equally impressed with each other. Finally, Ernest asked, "Who are you, my gifted friend?" Placing his finger on the volume Ernest had been reading, he replied, "I am the author of these poems." Quickly Ernest searched the face of the poet before gazing sadly at the Great Stone Face. "Why are you so downcast, my wise friend?" asked the poet. "All my life I have awaited fulfillment of a prophecy, and when I read your poems, I hoped that it might be fulfilled in you. You are now disappointed, as you were with Gather Gold, Old Blood and Thunder, and Old Stony Fizz. Yes, Ernest, you must add my name to your illustrious three, for I am not worthy of that great name. Why not? Your words have a divine ring, Ernest said. Perhaps, replied the poet, perhaps there is a far-off echo of a divine song in my writing, but my life has not been so sweet. I have lived in a manner of which I am not proud. His voice trailed off. The poet and Ernest sat together in silence for a long time. After the hour of sunset, as was his custom in those later years, Ernest went to talk with a group of people in a small pleasant nook in the mountains. Ernest normally stood on a small elevation, while the others sat or reclined on the grass. Off in the distance, the great stone face watched. Ernest began to speak, telling people what was on his mind and heart. His words had power, for they were based on experience and harmonized with the life he had always lived. Never, thought the poet, his eyes glistening with tears, never have I witnessed a man as powerful as this. As he listened, the poet looked off in the distance at the great face. Suddenly he threw his arms in the air. "Behold, behold, the great stone face," he shouted. Ernest whirled and saw that the poet was looking at him. "Ernest is himself the likeness of the great stone face," the poet exclaimed. All of the people looked first at Ernest and then at the mountain and saw what the poet said was true. The great stone face was in their midst, a man of integrity and love. And so it came to pass. A man born in the valley had grown to be a great and wise man, bearing the exact likeness of the great stone face. He was a man of peace and justice and love. The prophecy had been fulfilled. As we live in faith, may we become more and more like Jesus. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.